First off, on this week's edition of Inside the Zone, you may notice that we are not in studio, but I would like to point out how lucky our wives are. Your son is sick, my kids have e-learning, and yet here we are talking football in 2020 via this. How lucky are our wives that the type of men they have married can fulfill these roles like no men can?
Very lucky. A lot of people would say we're the lucky ones, but today at least, they're the lucky ones.
Mr. Mom stepping it up on both ends. Respect to the dads out there. The struggle is real. Speaking of the struggle is real, Snyder had struggled early in the season. We're going to start off with sectional semifinals in 6A Sectional 3. Snyder had started struggling early in the season. They played much better football in the second half. They've got Homestead this week. It's our Highlight Zone game of the week. Why is the Week 11 matchup going to look different than the Week 5 matchup where it was 33-3?
Well, Snyder has kind of found their rhythm in terms of what's working and the personnel that's working. I think these two, both offense and defense, the Snyder lineup looks a lot different than it did even just 5-6 weeks ago, with Kurt Timmon finding the combinations that work and also the kids finding confidence too. I think this was a directionless team early on that was struggling. And for Snyder, they didn't really know how to deal with it. It was kind of uncustomary. And talking to Coach Kurt Tippmann, he said, our young guys kind of watched our older kids win and triumph, and they felt like they could just do the same thing coming in, and they weren't able to. And so they had to work hard at it, get better. And these guys have found their footing, and they lose by 30 the first time around. I think it's going to be closer this time around on Friday.
Would you still say that Homestead is the favorite, though, in this one, based on what we saw throughout the entirety of the regular season?
Yeah, I would still put Homestead as the favorite in this one. I just feel that Snyder's a much better football team, and you also factor in, high school kids, and Chad Zolman's got to, guard against just because you beat a team by 30 in the regular season doesn't mean they can't put a scare into you in the playoffs. So that's probably the message that Chad Zolman's giving his kids this week, and you can't hammer that home enough, particularly for a team that every passing week we've seen look better and better than the Panthers.
And I got to say, we talk a lot about Mr. Ormsby being a guy that's improved a lot. That Snyder line and then Tyrese Brown has really, over the last 5 weeks, stepped up and led that offense because we weren't sure. Snyder always runs the football well. They've always got a back that can do some damage. And we were wondering who that was going to be this year. He's really taken the reins and run with it. Pun intended. For the last 5 weeks or so.
Yeah, yes, and they'll get DJ Moore back this week. He's a kid that's kind of been nursing a minor injury the last couple of weeks. The bye week really helped out as well. And conversely, on that defensive line, Iso Robinson, just a man up there up front, and has really given the opponents a lot of trouble. Watched him just wreak havoc against Bishop Luers in Week 9. So the lines especially are looking very good for Snyder. We'll see if they can compete with Homestead on Friday.
This is a pretty great sectional because both of these games are game of the week potential. You've got Carroll at Warsaw. Warsaw won the NLC. And you're talking about a Bart Curtis team that runs their offense. They're not going to throw it a lot. They're going to do a little misdirection. They're going to grind it out. A lot of different guys that could carry the football. Against the Carroll team, we know just loves to chuck it. I mean, these are two diametrically opposed offenses, but both have been successful in their own way.
And it's very fascinating matchup too because of these styles that these teams play. As you mentioned, Carroll wants to run and gun. They want to throw the football. They only give cursory glances at the run game. They're going to go pass the ball 75, 80, 85% of the snaps. Meanwhile, Warsaw just wants to control the ball, grind you down, play some Bart ball, and win ugly. And it's strength versus strength on the turf at Warsaw.
How do you see this one playing out? Because the one thing, we hadn't seen inclement weather, which obviously skews towards a running game. But with Carroll, I mean, they've had a lot of drives that are 2, 3, 4 play drives, 70 yards in a minute and a half type drives. Right. Warsaw, even if they're not clicking on all cylinders, they're going to take some time off the clock in their possessions. You're not going to get the ball 100 times like we've seen in weeks past with Carroll. So how do you approach that if you're Doug Dinan and make sure your team takes advantage of the opportunities you do have? Because they're just going to be just the way that they play. They're going to be fewer and far in between if Warsaw can run the football.
Yeah, I think in this respect, you just lean on what got you this far, at least what got Carroll success through the regular season. I still think you challenge Warsaw in that defensive backfield. You challenge those corners. You go over the top against the safeties and really make that defensive secondary of Warsaw make plays. And then conversely, if you can, giving up yardage and working time off the clock if you're the Carroll defense isn't a bad thing if you don't give up points. So I feel like Carroll's going to try to strike quick offensively and then just try to play the long game with Warsaw, kind of a bend, not break type defense. I think this game is closer than a lot of people think. And if Carroll isn't careful and is completely flat for 4 quarters, they could get clipped here.
Let's talk about 5A Sectional 11. We've got Northrop at Northside and Anderson at Dwenger. Anderson averages 11 points a game. I'm not even going to get into that discussion. I think we know where we're skewing there. Let's talk about Northrop, though, and Northside, because this is a game in Week 8. I was at the end of this game. It came down to a fourth-quarter touchdown and then a 2-point conversion try that Northrop stopped. It was a 1-point game, 28-27, Northrop won. Both these teams have 4-5 records. This is about as even a matchup as you can get when you look at the numbers.
I don't think we give Northrop's defense enough credit for that matchup because they scored early in that fourth quarter to take the lead and had to get a couple stops on Deuce Taylor and that Northside offense to hold on to that win. So it wasn't like they scored late and won. So we talk a lot about Demarius Cowan for good reason, the running back for Northrop, but let's give some props to that defense that got stops when they needed to in the fourth quarter against Northside. And I know there's been a lot of jawing for the last couple of weeks on social media between these two fan bases on who's going to win this one. Northside wants to get revenge. Northrop feels like it has the recipe to make it 2 for 2 against the Legends this year. So I think this is, when you look at toss-up games, just like the regular season game matchup between these two, this could go either way.
Yeah, I think the one thing that really interests me is when you saw the all-SAC teams that came out, and I can't remember a team with 4 wins like Northside getting so much respect, in terms of where the coaches put guys on the all-conference teams. It's rare. Meanwhile, Northrop, not as much, but it seems like they don't have the stars outside of Cowan. They don't have the stars, but they're just really solid all around, whereas Northside is a little more boom or bust when you go through their roster.
Yeah, don't get Tim Manigal started on the all-SAC first team. So
I had some questions. That's a whole nother show, but I had some questions myself.
He's a guy that's wondering why he only has one all-conference first-team player in the last 2 years. But that could be a conversation for another time with Tim Manigal. But it is interesting that, you look at a team like Northrop and you see, okay, Demarius Cowan, and then good luck finding, naming any of their other players. But guys like Jelante Hinton on the edge of that defense has been one, other than, I think him and Tate Johnson for Northside are the 2 top freshmen in the SAC. So
for sure.
In this game. So a lot of dynamic play going back and forth with these 2 teams. And so you look at it and you go, okay, maybe the winner, they'll just get to lose to Dwenger anyway. But I think Northside played Dwenger tough there earlier in the season. So you have to feel Northside wants another shot at Dwenger, but they're going to have to avenge a loss to do it. And Northrop's no pushover.
Let's move on to sectional 4A19. We knew this was a juggernaut of a sectional coming in. You got East Noble at DeKalb, which is a surprise, and Northwood at Leo. I want to touch on both of those because East Noble with a dominant performance. Rowan Zolman looked really good against Columbia City, had one of the best individual performances we've seen this season. And then DeKalb obviously stunned Angola. What's your take heading into this game? Because, DeKalb went from losing 55-17, 55-18 in week 1 to winning 7-0 against Angola here in week 10.
And talking to Coach Seth Wilcox of DeKalb, the question was, how'd you do it? How did you go from giving up 55 to shutting out Angola? And he said, it was tough week 1 because they came in with a new head coach, new offense, new defensive coordinator, and it was just a lot of new things out there. And kids kind of really didn't know where to go, who to listen to, where to be, and all that. It came together over the last 2.5 months for DeKalb, despite having to sit out 3 games due to COVID. So exceptional job by Seth Wilcox to get to this second round of the postseason. But the way East Noble is playing, watching them last week and just giving Columbia City absolutely no chance in that football game from the first opening possession, getting a 3-and-out, then going down and scoring a touchdown early to really set the tone. That team is getting healthy. It's getting experience with some of those younger kids, and it's playing with a lot of confidence right now. So it's going to be tough for DeKalb to make it 2 surprises in 2 weeks.
Leo, Northwood is intriguing. You're talking about power run teams historically. How concerned are you, though, if you're Jared Souter and you take a look? We knew Northridge wasn't going to be a team they could walk all over last week, but I would guess in the first half they probably would – Leo would say this – they played one of their worst halves of football all season long. They had some fumbles. Obviously, it says a lot that they were able to come back and win on the road with 2 second-half touchdowns. But what's your concern with Leo in this game? How do you see this playing out? Because the good thing for Leo, it's at home, but Northwood has traveled well in the postseason in years past.
Yeah, they have. I think this is another big challenge for Leo. I think the concerning thing, if you're a Leo fan, is last week against Northridge, admittedly a good team, good defensive team, only accounting for 128 total offensive yards. You were outgained 276 to 128. You made the plays when you had to get a win, but going forward, you're going to face a lot better defenses than Northridge. Northwood has a very solid defense. If you advance to play East Noble next week, another defense playing very good, let alone when getting into the regional and the semi-state. So the concern for Leo, and I feel like we keep dogging them, but we kind of just keep focusing on this, is at some point they're going to have to make some big plays vertically frequently. I don't think 1, 2, 3 passes a game to keep defenses honest, at least completions and big plays on third downs is going to be enough to get this team deep in the postseason. So they found a way last week. Kudos to them, but it is definitely concerning that offense spun its wheels for a fair amount of last week. And I think they're going to have to find some rhythm offensively against Northwood because they're a better team than their record indicates.
Yeah. Let's talk about 4A Sectional 20. Southside at Marion, Wayne at Delta. Really a flip of last week where we saw Southside and Wayne both at home against mid-level NEA teams. We wondered how those SAC teams would fare. Obviously, they fared pretty well with a couple of wins, albeit not blowouts by any means, but Southside did put up 30. Which of these two teams has the better chance to win? Because Marion, we know, has transformed itself into a pretty good football program over the last years, although they've got a different guy leading it now. And Delta, historically, is a pretty solid 4A football team.
I think Wayne's the better football team than Southside, but I'm going to give the Archers a better chance to win on Friday, namely because Delta is so good. And their 2 losses are to New Palestine and to Mount Vernon, 2 top 5 teams in their respective classes. I feel like Southside is going in with a strength-on-strength type thing with Marion in terms of athletes on the field. I still think the NCC is reasonably weak in football, Lafayette Jeff notwithstanding up at the top. Mm-hmm. But I feel like Southside is battle-tested. We saw it last week against New Haven. I see a lot of similarities between New Haven and Marion to where Southside could potentially go in there and at least be competitive, whereas I see Wayne having a lot of trouble going down towards Muncie to take on the Eagles.
Yeah, let's skip on to 3A Sectional 27, Concordia at Oak Hill, and then McConaughey at Norwell. With Concordia having to sit out next week and not playing, or last week and not playing against Peru, and then Oak Hill, I'm not sure how much you can chalk up to the weather, because we had great weather the first 9 weeks of the season, which was awesome, and then it was kind of not awesome this past Friday. It would concern me if I was Oak Hill and I put a goose egg in the first half against a winless Belmont team. I'll just put that out there. How do you see this one playing out? Because on paper, Oak Hill's got a 7-3 record. Concordia, yes, they're rested, but it would have been nice to have some momentum going into this game.
Yeah, most definitely. You look at Oak Hill, and their 3 losses were to teams in the regular season that had a combined 1 loss. So they're very good. You get them on their turf, literally on their turf in Swayze. It could be a tough matchup. But I feel, man, that week off, I feel gives tremendous ability for Concordia because they were bruised, they were battered, they were beaten down after 9 weeks in the SAC. Giving them that 1 week to rest and replenish and refocus, I think, is a big advantage for Concordia. I think this is a tough one on the road. I think it's a tight one, but I think late Concordia comes up with maybe a key turnover, gets the win in lovely Swayze.
And then for Norwell, obviously they played on Saturday and played very well against Heritage. Maconiqua is a team that's 5-3, but Norwell's playing so well right now. What is it about them that makes them a team to beat in this sectional? Because if you're Norwell, you can never look past a team. But I know that when they saw this bracket out, they were thinking, okay, we're ready for whoever we face in the sectional championship game, probably Concordia.
Well, the thing with Norwell is it's so balanced. We've talked about teams that, okay, rely on one side of the football to make up for the other side. But every week it changes with Norwell, whether they have an amazing defense or a high-flying offense. Both ways, it's happening for Norwell. They're really clicking on all cylinders on both sides of the football. Max Ringer, a huge game last Saturday against Heritage. They rushed for a tremendous amount of yardage, really shut down Heritage. I feel they only had like 2 first downs, something like that. It was dominant. So once again, I think they're facing an inferior opponent that they should be able to handle on Friday, and they'll get ready for the winner of Oak Hill and Concordia.
2A sectional 35, we got Prairie Heights at Eastside, and then really the game with all the intrigue, Lures at Fairfield. Eastside obviously looked dominant against Bluffton. It was an impressive performance. Lures dominated Whitco as we thought. Fairfield with another solid performance. These are two teams that are, record-wise, you would say, well, Fairfield's undefeated, but we know what Lures has in the SAC. How do you see this one playing out? Because Lures has to play on the road, but they're obviously prepared to face a team that has talents like Fairfield.
I feel like both defenses have tremendous problems to deal with and figure out going into Friday night. You look at Bishop Lures' defense is how they defend the triple option and how they're able to really limit Fairfield moving the football. And Coach Matt Thacker has said it before, it's not a sexy offense. They're perfectly fine running the fullback dive in that triple option and getting 4 yards of carry. They're perfectly fine with doing that. And we know that Bishop Lures lacks those big physical defensive linemen to really bottle up the middle. So how does Bishop Lures defend that? Conversely, how does Fairfield match up with Bishop Lures' athletes on the outside? Guys like Brody Glenn, guys like Sir Hale, they put him in the slot. How can they match up with those guys on the outside and downfield? Those are big questions that both defensive coordinators have to figure out. And the defense that gets it right is going to advance.
Yeah, to me, you get Sir Hale the football because he's going to be the best athlete on the field. And you say, all right, figure it out. Go score. Like you get the football. Get him the football. 1A sectional 43. We didn't talk about this really last week because the matchups weren't all that sexy. But South Adams at Monroe Central, Madison Grat, and Tri-Central. South Adams at Monroe Central, they played back in week 3. It was 31-14. Monroe Central's a good football program. It just happens that South Adams is a great football program right now. How do you see this one playing out? Because, again, it was only a 2-touchdown essentially game earlier in the season, but now you got to go to Monroe Central. You got to pack it up on the road, and I think it's going to be I don't know if it'll be a tighter game score-wise, but there are some challenges in this game for South Adams.
Well, I think Grant Mosier is going to have a lot of sleepless nights, probably from here on out in the playoffs, but especially this week because you see a lot of similarities to last year in the regional. You played Monroe Central in the first part of the year in the regular season. You handled them easily. You've handled them the last several years when you needed to. And then that complacency can start creeping in when you've dominated a team time after time after time. And Monroe Central is no slouch. They're arguably a top 10 team in Class 1A, and you have to go play them at their place. So the guarding against looking past Monroe Central has to be key here for Grant Mosier. I feel like his team learned a lesson last year, but you never know with high school kids when you look at, okay, we're playing Monroe Central again. We've handled them. We should roll through this sectional. This is a game similar to last regional a year ago against Adams Central, where if South Adams is flat, they can get clipped. I like the Starfires here, but it has some eerie similarities to last year.
Last stop, 1A sectional 44. You got Triton at Adams Central, and then you've got Caston at Southwood. Southwood had the wildest week that I've seen in a long time. all last week. They're going to be our ops team of the week if they can practice this week. Talk to Coach Snyder. We talked to Coach Snyder earlier. He's hoping to get 2 practices in this week. It might not be till Wednesday, though, so we may have to hold off on Team of the Week a couple days, actually, this week. Because to me, they're the Team of the Week. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then Adams Central is at Triton, or Triton is at Adams Central, rather. How do you see these games playing out? I mean, I would imagine Southwood goes in as a heavy favorite. Adams Central is a heavy favorite, and they need to get tuned up for next week when they'll likely play in the sectional championship game.
I agree. Merely tune-ups, I feel, for both of these football teams. Come out, stay healthy, play well, get a rhythm going, because that Adams Central-Southwood matchup coming up hopefully next week is going to be pretty darn exciting for a couple of teams that have built quite a rivalry over the last half dozen years in the playoffs. So fingers crossed, Southwood's good to go, and we'll see them hopefully colliding next Friday night.
Final question, what are you most looking forward to this week?
My goodness, I hope we can get to Friday with the majority of the games we just talked about playing. We saw games be postponed last week. We talked about Southwood. They were off, then they were on. So Peru had to bow out. We've already seen one game in Southern Indiana already postponed for this Friday. So as we see COVID numbers rising, it's becoming more and more prevalent around the state of Indiana. Hopefully it does not derail the football season. We've been lucky this far to get the majority of the season in. Let's hope it continues without seeing a couple area teams see their season end without a loss.
Sounds good to me. At this point, it would be a shame because we've gotten so far. So far, we got to finish this thing.
That's right. Let's see it to the end.
All right. That'll do it for this week's edition of Inside the Zone. He's Justin Kenny. I'm Glenn Marini, and we'll see you next Monday, most likely back in person in the studio.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for logging on to Wayne.com, and we'll see you next Monday.